Hello. Today's episode is with Hesam Abedini, who is a composer, performer, and actual music educator, music faculty in Southern California. And Hesam and I get into a cool conversation about the role of music in academia. We talk about Persian music. We talk about his radio opera, which was his PhD work, finishing his work at the University of California, Irvine. And actually, Hesam and I both went to the University of California, Irvine, and I don't think we overlapped by a year, but as I was leaving, he was coming in, and we got to work together a few times when I was still working down doing sound at UC Irvine and stuff. So I got to know his music a little bit, and he's an awesome performer. And even this conversation, we end with a crazy free improvisation that is a tribute to some of the struggles and people struggling right now in Iran and who have been struggling over the past several years. It ends up being sort of a beautiful performance and sort of interesting because it's over Zoom too. But before we get to all that, please remember that I am a value for value based content creator, musician, podcaster, all that stuff. So that means that any value that I provide to you, I ask that you respond in kind by providing value back to me. There's a few easy ways to do that. Probably the easiest is liking, leave a comment, subscribe, share any of my content that you like, that you feel is valuable, that other people might like. All that stuff, super, super valuable to me. The other things you can do is you can donate to my Venmo. There's a QR in the corner of the screen. You can also donate Bitcoin. There's a QR in the other corner of the screen if you're into the Bitcoin thing. Or you can sign up on my Patreon. There's a link below, and it's a monthly subscription basis. And depending on what tier you sign up for, you get extra little goodies and things like that. And all of that is value back to me for any of the value that you derive from my content. Welcome to Music in Mind, with Anthony Calkins. All right. Hello, everybody. I am here with Hesam Abedini, who is a composer and performer and educator. I think currently still based in Irvine, right?
Yes.
Cool. So Hesam and I met many years ago, probably 2017, 18, something like that.
17, yeah.
I had graduated from the program at UC Irvine that Hesam was in at the time. Working on his PhD. It was just this weird time where the program had switched because I got my MFA there and he got his PhD there, or it finished, right? You finished your PhD there.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes,
So it's been a while. So
yeah.
How's life?
Right. Hey, thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me.
Of course.
It's a great pleasure to be here with you. And I started 2017,
okay.
And I think that was when we first met. We met in 2018 again, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's good that we met for parties rather than meeting in a classroom or something.
Sure.
It was more intimate. Yeah, it was great to meet you then. And of course, and I recently finished. So I did finish my PhD last June.
Oh, wow.
2022.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a long way, and yeah.
Right, and you had to go through the whole pandemic thing in the middle of it.
Right. Yeah, that was something. I mean,
I was so glad I was not in school.
Yeah, it was because it changed, because it was exactly the year I wanted to start my dissertation project.
Right.
And I was ready for it because it was supposed to be this concert involving more than 15 performers. Wow. And suddenly I had to just start rethinking about the whole thing. And that's how I ended up creating and producing a radio opera. So it was supposed to be an actual opera, but then I turned it to a radio opera, what they called it. And yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, it was the pandemic. The funny thing is actually that I remember I was presenting my work to the department, and it was exactly during that time of my presentation when we all got what they call it here in UC Irvine, Zot alert, saying that you have to leave. This is the last day of classes. Everyone just go home and quarantine.
Did you get to finish your presentation?
I did. Everyone sat down for the entire presentation. Then when it was the Q&A part, nobody had any questions.
I bet.
Everyone wanted to leave.
It must have been a crazy feeling.
It was. I felt like I was doing something wrong. Nobody asked questions. And then they came to me and said, hey, we are under quarantine now from now on.
my
So we all
gosh.
have to leave. And yeah, so.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So the radio opera, I mean, the opera thing is cool. Actually, I want to do an opera at some point. It's sort of a goal of mine. I haven't found my way there yet. But was it a live performed opera remotely?
Well, actually, no. So the point of the radio opera was to eliminate any kind of visual aspects of the music, because I'm interested in creating music for on some mixed ensembles, bringing different instruments from different traditions. With I'm more focused on Persian music in general because of my background. But the point of it was actually kind of I can say it was an opportunity for me. The COVID became an opportunity for me. To think about how I could illuminate all the visual aspects of it. So the exotic elements of having these instruments that are less known in the ensemble, and just have the audience to focus on the sound and what the sound is bringing to the story. So yeah, that's why I recorded the work. Basically, it is a work for computer music. So some part of it was just music concrete, music that was created on different DAWs or using Macs computer programming software, and part of it was recorded by a string quartet, which was recorded. I was present in that recording specifically. So they recorded four movement of the piece, and the rest of it was recorded by my own ensemble, which was recorded actually remotely. So everyone recorded in their rooms. They were about like 8-9 musicians who recorded the pieces that I wrote for my ensemble. It's called Seaberg Ensemble. In Farsi, Si means 30 and Berg means leaf. So it's 30 Leaves Ensemble, basically.
Oh, nice.
And the ensemble is an intercultural, what I call it, a creative intercultural ensemble, because it's tied to the kind of the jazz scene coming from AACM. And so, yeah, it's a combination of jazz, Persian music, free improvisation, and that's the focus of the ensemble.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this combination creates this radio opera that I created. And
produced. I mean, what you said in there at the beginning was interesting about eliminating the visual element, especially using Persian instruments. Is that something sort of for American audiences where there's sort of like a distraction or something like that?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's a distraction, but my take on this was, for example, maybe the audience have already heard of Silk Road Ensemble, which is an ensemble of mixed instruments and mixed traditions from a different part of the world. And I was always thinking about how their shows, I mean, they are doing a great work, specifically when it gets to the social influences and effects they have with bringing all these different musical cultures together on one stage. But at the same time, I feel like usually when we go to these kind of concerts and we see these performances, we also get somehow amazed and moved by and excited by the fact that we are seeing all these instruments that we don't necessarily see, or we don't see as often. And so that kind of made me think about how, a lot of intercultural collaborations in general are becoming kind of a space for a dominated culture to be presented there as the main main force, and have other less known musical cultures to come in as like some colorful things and that are exotic. So I wanted to illuminate that exoticism from the music, and one of the ways I found that could be possible was illuminating the visual components of it. So this way I wanted the audience to focus more on what the sonic result has to say and what is it that it's sharing. So that was kind of my focus, because I had for example oud in my group, which is a Persian, and it's shared with Arabic lute kind of instrument, and I had that with when you have it on the stage with a bass player or with a percussion player, or you have a Persian vocal performer on the stage singing all these different ornamentations that does not really exist. So just illuminating that kind of helps me to create this sonic space for the audience to focus on what the sound can bring for them.
Sure. The what you're talking about there about the idea of the sonic result is interesting to me, and I'm always thinking about this with music, because I live in Austin, Texas now, which is sort of like blues rock world. Everything here, Stevie Ray Vaughan, guitar solos, it's great. But the idea of sonic result versus a show is very interesting to me in what is music and what makes it powerful. And coming out of the university, I remember not really thinking at all about where music exists in terms of between an audience and a performer and a composer, and this idea of where is the music. And it's sort of like, I see it now as sort of, it's this shared mental space.
Right.
And how to cultivate that. And I see very much what you're saying about the sort of the distraction of the exoticism of, oh, there's a cool instrument sitting next to all of our normal instruments that we're used to, or something like that. Normal in quotes, of course. But yeah, so where are you on that in terms of the...
This is really interesting, actually. Well, I think actually the performance aspects of it, and just being live face to face with the audience, is as equally as important as the sonic space you are creating. So I don't think they are separated necessarily, and my goal was not to really say that or state that if you don't have visual components, then exoticism wouldn't exist in the music. I don't think that's true, but that was just a way for experimentation. I would like to actually hear from you and your story, because you did get your MFA. And I remember you were thinking about going for a PhD program or not. I think the whole point of for a musician, at least this is my thought, to go over these academic ways is more to be able to experiment, and while getting feedbacks from people who are actively involved with thinking about what are the possibilities in order to have to make your horizons of course wider, and but at the same time a lot of things happens outside of the academia, and that's where you actually get the actual feedback from your audience. So I think that performance aspect of creating music and performing within the audience being there changes the whole way of you thinking about the music that you are creating in that moment. So I think that's as equally important as what I was just mentioning that I did with my radio. So this was more for me of an experimentation to see what feedback do I receive from the audience who are listening to this radio program. And it's very interesting to be honest. I think I receive the less people wanted to listen to a only sound with no visuals,
Right.
and it's an hour long work, so people tend to get a little bit tired of it. When I was presenting it, I had everyone to sit in a dark room and had the music going on, and so there was no visuals. I wanted them to focus on the sound, but it was like an experimentation for me.
Right.
Whereas, when I perform with my ensemble on stage, we receive the energy from the audience, and that kind of shapes how we perform. Whereas during the pandemic, we were supposed to record all these pieces in these tiny rooms that we were already tired of, right? So it was way different. The feeling was way different. And we were like, because we were recording each of us separately, we had to record and then again re-record based on the recording of others. So we did this back and forth many, many times. That changed the way we thought about the music.
Right.
So again, that's why I said that this pandemic turned to be an opportunity to just experiment with this idea. And I don't necessarily think that's the way I want to go from now. But I think the idea of creating radio operas is very interesting and appealing to me, because we tend to drive a lot and listen to a lot of different sort of, musics. Hopefully some people are driving right now and listening to your podcast and our conversation. But with that being in mind, I think it's still fascinating to just create sound and share your stories through that.
Yes.
And one thing I tried to do with that radio opera specifically was to create sonic spaces where the audience could use that moments to internalize what they have experienced throughout the previous section of the piece. That was something I tried to do throughout the work I created, because I had different stories which I was mapping and kind of connecting to one another using these sonic spaces that I was creating for the audience to think about. I really didn't want to have a very direct message, nor I wanted to make any statements. Rather, I wanted to just share the personal stories I had, the things that were important to me, and I have been constantly thinking about through that work. So
nice.
So yeah, all of that being said, I think the performance part of our work as musicians is very important, and I think that is something we all use in order to enrich our music, the music that we make, because that's where you get your inspirations. I think it's true, just connecting to others,
absolutely,
and sharing and listening, and then coming up with your own kind of stories and to tell.
Yeah. So many things about what you just said resonated with me. Let's try to figure out how to do it. I remember when I was working on my MFA, Chris Dobrian, who was my advisor, would always ask me about how what I was doing was research. And it's a little bit confusing to think about what musical research, what that even means. What is research with music? But I think what you're talking about makes a lot of sense about the idea of experimenting. And the other thing that you said just now that hit me actually reminds me of a podcast I was just listening to about the difference between art and artifice. And he's sort of a philosopher who is talking about how we're sort of in an age of artifice. But what you were saying about how you weren't trying to make any particular statement necessarily, but sort of exploring an idea. That's what he's talking about when he's talking about art or something like that. He talked a lot about the Van Gogh sunflowers or something like that. The idea that each sunflower is sort of, he described it as monstrous, as in unique in itself. It's not reducible to anything. It's not exactly like a sunflower. It's just like itself. And it's just an exploration of itself. And Van Gogh's willingness just to stare at it and just take this one image all the way through and finish it out. And it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean, go vote for this person or buy this hamburger or anything like that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think that, my research has started where I I s- when I was introduced kind of to the concept of intention and setting your intention for yourself, it's really difficult to go after people and say, "Oh, your intention is this or is that."
Yeah.
Or figuring out what the intention of other people is, but you can at least be aware of what your intentions are with music or with creating with being creative in general as a musician. So my interest was in setting my intention for my audience by not necessarily only saying what my intentions is in a program note or in a talk or things like that, or in a conversation. Rather, I was trying to set my intention with this basically creative work that I was doing. And I think what you are referring to, I mean, and we are talking about, I think it's all about the intention. So sometimes we say stories to, like when we have a conversation, we start telling a story because we want the other person to listen to this story in order for them to go to certain direction. So we want to direct them with the story we say or we share. But sometimes you just say the story for the sake of the story itself to becomes a food for thought. Or something that would make you think about a concept, not necessarily deciding or making a decision on a concept. So that, I think that's the big difference between making your, setting your intentions on directing people to a certain way or certain path, or having them to just start thinking about something with that story that you have to say. So I'm not a good person to come up with conclusions. I don't like conclusions. So I would rather have an open ending when we have a conversation. But I think it's very important to share your stories. And that's all my point. I have been just trying to share the stories, the struggles I had in my life, anything I have gone over, as a musician, as an immigrant. It has been always about just sharing my stories. And in order to do that, you want to be a good listener. I mean, I haven't been today because I have been just talking over and over. That happens to me sometimes. It's just start talking when something is exciting, when there's an exciting subject. But so listening and really just sharing your thoughts, not necessarily looking for a conclusion. I think that's something I was trying to focus on. With this project and every project almost I do.
I love it. That's beautiful. Another thing he was saying that is a little bit tangential, but he was talking about the archetype of the idiot and how important that is for musicians to be sort of, quote, idiots. Meaning, when he said it doesn't mean that you're stupid or can't do math or something like that. It has to do with the idea of focusing somewhere that's different from where everybody else is focusing. So there's a fire in the town square, and you notice that the fire person's nails are dirty or something like that. And that's what you're focused on. Everyone else is worried about this fire. And it's that willingness to sort of zoom in and let your brain sort of go in directions that may or may not be germane to anything. It's sort of like what you're saying about being bad at drawing conclusions, but being willing to tell the story, being willing to share your experience, your thoughts, things like that.
It also reminds me of this idea which I tackle on when I wrote my dissertation, the written part of it that I had to do also, which was focus on cultural hegemony. And well, a lot of people have talked about it, of course, and we'll talk about it because it's something very serious, especially as we live in an era where the market is basically deciding everything for us as human beings. But the other part of it is when you get specifically into intercultural collaborations and what it means to bring different cultures or traditions together in one act or in one piece. The interesting thing I found about it is the difference between trying to be inclusive versus trying to be modernized, whatever it means, that the term modern means in the West specifically, because of course, in this battle of power, at least for now, in the century we are living, the West is winning, right? So Europe and US, of course, is winning. So having that in mind, I think, as specifically musicians, I think this idiotness, if this word exists or not, idiotness,
It
can I
should.
say it?
It's fine.
Okay.
It works.
Good.
It works.
No, sometimes my English is lacking.
No, I understand it.
But okay, great, good. So I think that idiotness would be a way for us actually to start looking into why actually, when we talk about diversity, when we talk about inclusiveness, are we talking about McDonaldization of foods, like thinking about we can create this beautiful sandwiches, but when you start eating them, does not really, you feel like, oh, is this meat, or is this like this like am I biting a bread or not? Right. So thinking about how the exotic image of it is not important, rather it's the quality of it. And what is the quality of it? Like, I feel as an immigrant, it may be a little bit harsh to say it, but I feel like, we are very fortunate. I am very fortunate to live in a country where we are able to talk about this, because in so many other countries you cannot even talk about these concepts.
Right.
I am able to talk about these concepts, yet when it gets to diversity, I'm always wondered what it means that we are diverse. We have a diverse country. Is it all about like having restaurants of different type of foods from different traditions? Is that enough? Or are we trying to say that, we have this great culture of accepting others within ourselves, but as soon as they are inside us, we kind of create this hierarchy where this culture that's accepting you should look at this culture as the best culture because it's accepting you? Or is it that we are doing it because we are really thinking inclusive, and we want to also enrich ourselves with learning about other cultures? Or is it that we want to say, we are welcoming other cultures because we are great, and then as soon as they are in, we just care about them because we can taste their foods or a little bit of their music, and then put them away and whenever we want? So that's really a struggle for me, and I try to actually address it in this work that I did, this specific radio opera, because that's something that I'm always struggling with. And I think this is the kind of the idiotness.
I love it.
Because you start looking into stories from different angle, while the market wants you to only focus on it from one specific lens, because they don't want you to start thinking about other things, because at the end it's all about the war between different labels that they want to sell, right? So right. So that I thought that's also interesting about what you just mentioned about this podcast. What is the name of this? Can we say the name? Do you accept advertisements?
Wait, for my own show? Oh no, I don't have ads. No. I did for a while. I had an ad on it. I don't know. I just don't like it. I don't like the idea.
No, I mean that the podcast you said you were listening to.
Oh, yeah. Let me see if I remember the person's name. It's a podcast called Unregistered. He's a history professor named Thaddeus Russell, who I think has left academia. But he has an interesting. He has a book that he wrote, and he has a whole sort of theory he developed called renegade history. Okay. And it's sort of fun. It's the idea that we're used to reading history books that talk about kings and presidents and generals and things like that. But his theory is that criminals and prostitutes and sort of the social dissidents move culture just as much as all of these kings and everything like that. And
interesting.
And so he writes a whole history about how, he has a book called The Renegade History of the United States, and he talks about how prostitutes were huge in making the West, and the mob was huge in the development of jazz around the country because they hired the jazz musicians and they started all the clubs. And it's just all of these ways that sort of criminals and societal dissidents were huge in shaping the culture that is America today.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. But the
thanks
person
for
he had
sharing this.
on was, what is his name? Let's see if I can find it. His name was J.F. Martel.
Martel. Okay. Great. Thanks for sharing this. Great. Okay.
But yeah, what you were saying about sort of exploring the idea, even just a question of what does inclusive diversity look like? What would that mean as a world? Is it that there's a bunch of different restaurants? Does it mean something else? Is it the Silk Road Ensemble? What is it?
Yeah, that's a very deep question, and it's very difficult to find the answer to it. Actually, right. I think the whole point of inclusiveness is to not find an answer. Like if you find the answer, then you are boxing it again. So you're
right.
putting
It's
it
self-defeating.
Yeah. Yes. So I like the idea of not having a concrete answer to this question, and because I think it's very personal.
Sure.
But yeah, definitely acknowledgement, like being able to acknowledge that everything that exists, but being able to acknowledge, like if you have, for example, if I have privilege, then compared to other people, if being able to have empathy with other people who go through certain injustices because of their backgrounds.
Sure.
These are, I think, more important. So we want to develop those instead of coming up to a conclusion saying, this is what it means to be inclusive. So therefore, what my take is with music in general, I grew up practicing piano, like classical piano, and I loved singing Persian music. But I remember back in Iran, in the conservatory, I had she was a very nice musicianship teacher I had, but she taught, and it wasn't her, I think it was her mentors also mindset, that they told me that if you want to be a good pianist, you shouldn't sing Persian music because of the microtones and all these different tuning systems. For some reason, that's what...
So you're saying that would detract from your piano playing?
Yeah, so they would say that your ears would go bad, actually.
Go bad?
Yeah, so and then you wouldn't become successful or something. So I don't know. I mean, this mindset was there, that this music is, the intonation is just wrong, kind of. That's what they felt it was. And so I stopped taking Persian vocal classes. And yeah, of course, I didn't have any family members who were musicians. So I listened to my mentor. I wanted to be a good pianist at first, and then sing. So then, I grew up, went to Armenia, where I studied in the conservatory for 3 years before I came to the US.
Wow, cool.
And so there I was a piano performance. And I remember my advisor there once telling me, he was great. Like, I loved working with him. He was an excellent pianist and teacher. And he once told me that, you always will have an accent in your piano performance because you grew up in Iran and you listen to this music. And that made me think of, who am I and who I want to be and what am I doing with the piano and with this piano performing, like playing 6-7 hours every day, practicing, concertos and all that. And then so when I came to the US, I found this opportunity to just figure out who I am and who I want to be and what do I want to do with music. And so when I started, I love jazz and Persian music, so I had the opportunity to start working on all that at the same time, working on my compositions. So I have realized, and I came to this sort of partially conclusion, because I said I don't like conclusions, but at least with this I realized how labels and we label different genres or we label different traditions, how these labels sometimes start to shape us and
Sure.
who we are. And so I realized that in order to be inclusive within myself and with myself, I should just ignore all those labels and all those styles. So what I do is now I kind of think of myself as a polystylistic musician.
Sure.
Who I don't want to focus on a specific style, because I think as soon as you have a label, you create a box, and you want to fit in with a specific style, you are already you are already boxed in a specific way of thinking. And I think it should be us creating the traditions and styles, and it shouldn't be the other way around. So I think and that's kind of a quote from Hafiz Modirzadeh. He's a great saxophone player. He's now teaching in San Francisco State University.
Oh, cool.
He's an amazing jazz musician who is also looking for liberation in music. And so I think it's very important to free yourself from labels that those are specifically exists because you want to sell at the end.
Exactly.
And you have to be able to also communicate with others, be able to shortly say, I am this and I'm selling this product, right? So you need that. And sometimes you need them, you use them, it's okay, and it's good to use them actually. But what is important for me is when it gets to think about yourself and what you want to do, you want to be aware of this issue that exists and make sure that you fight kind of against it while you are using it in order to find a better way to shape all these market that exists.
Right. It's a tricky sort of road to go down, or a path to follow. I mean, even something like polystylistic, even that word, it makes me think of things.
Right. Yeah.
It's like when people say eclecticism, and now you're thinking of something, and you're thinking of kind of a new tradition. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think that the good thing about it then is you create new traditions. So you become so instead of, holding on to a tradition so dearly is great too. I mean, that's a choice, right? You make a choice. It's important that you know what you are doing, and you know that you are, what you are doing is holding on to this specific tradition, right? And so know what your intention is and make sure that this is what you want. But then, when you think, okay, I want to go beyond the traditions that exist, I think there is when the creativity happens. Absolutely. And also that's when exactly you can become inclusive as a person.
Sure.
And
well, because there's nothing that's excluded then.
Right. In a way, yes. Of course, we need boundaries in order to overcome our anxieties, right? As human beings, if everything is free and we are like completely free, we may end up probably will end up being anxious about what's going on, what's going to happen next, right? So we need some sort of boundaries, but I think within that, I want to work within that. I don't want to destroy everything that exists. I'm not into that. I want to make sure I work.
It's quite a task. Everything.
Yeah. So So I think definitely you are creating new traditions this way. But the good thing about that tradition is the point of that tradition is not to be hold on to so dearly. It's for the tradition exists to be to evolve when the next people get into it, or the community as the community grows.
Yeah, I'm interested in how this, because now I'm thinking of a lot of AACM ideas, and so your connection with AACM, and because you said the Seaberg ensemble is in some ways sort of
so the mindset
traditionally connected with them, or something,
right? Because of people who we studied with, the mentors we had. So For example, some of us studied with Anthony Davis and Nicole Mitchell, studied with jazz musicians who come from that culture. Right. And we have been also inspired by the music that they have created, like a lot of the AACM musicians, and that's and Hafez Modirzadeh and people like him. I think that's why I say that kind of the connection comes from there, where we want to work with. I'm always interested to working with what we have, and be constructive on top of what exists, instead of thinking that we have to go revolutionary from the basics.
Completely destructive, right?
Yeah. I mean, within this already a revolution. It's a revolutionary mindset, but it works with the whatever exists. It acknowledges what exists, what has happened through the history. It doesn't say because something in the history was necessarily on humanity, or it was the injustice appeared. We have to just erase that. Instead of thinking of that, we think about the opportunities. What are the opportunities now to get better at something, or what are the opportunities now to go inclusive and be more diverse and all that.
Yeah. So moving then, sort of pivoting to the performance side of you, I'm interested because, as my understanding at least, is you have pretty extensive performance experience, and I didn't know about your study in Armenia with the classical piano. But I think when I met you, you were even touring a lot, or sort of going around, like playing all the time, it seemed like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, until before the pandemic, of course, I was playing many shows.
Right.
Yeah, almost every other week or so I was performing, or every week. And I do perform in different settings. So I have my own Seaberg ensemble is something I was mostly involved with performing a lot, especially in the Bay Area and California. We have performed abroad as well, but other than that, I have another ensemble which is a talk ensemble, and talk ensemble is focused on performing purely Persian classical music and Persian folkloric music. And we do perform. Last time actually we performed was in October. Back in October, we performed in a mini tour in the East Coast, and then I think next 2 months from 1 month from now in April we are gonna in late April we are gonna perform in Orange County again. And I do perform with other classical Persian music ensembles. Namad is one of them, which we had an album. Actually, we recorded that in 2018. I think. And then I do write chamber music works for different.
I saw that you had something. The Jack Quartet was playing something.
Yes, so I had I had I'm interested in writing string quartets a lot. So I had my string quartets performed by Jack. There's that album that I co-produced with our mentor Christopher Dobrian, and that one was recorded 2018, published 2020, and that was works for a string quartet, Del Sol String Quartet, who are based in San Francisco. They performed 7 pieces composed by Iranian and Iranian American composers, and for somehow that we didn't know how it happened, because we didn't put a lot of energy in like advertising it, but it was charted in the Billboard classical music.
Oh wow, congratulations.
3 weeks in a row. And I don't know how it happened. So it was great. It was great experience doing that, producing that, and being a composer in that. And then I also perform with improvisers, like free improvisations. I'm really interested in doing that, specifically bringing kind of the the aspects and techniques that I have learned from singing classical Persian music
Right.
into just free improvisation and working with creating noise and sounds and
Yep.
creating my own kind of languages, made up languages as I just improvise, because I was interested in that since I was a kid.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So when I was a very, very little, like I was like 10, 8, I would go to the piano and start playing chords or playing just random things and start singing as if I was singing in a foreign language. And that foreign language
Neat.
didn't exist. So I'm using that whenever I'm like improvising.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Have you sort of codified any of it, or is it all sort of like ephemeral, like disappears as?
It just it just happens at the
Right.
moment. And yeah, actually I did some of it in an album that was recently published. It was a work of collective students under Michael Dessen's direction in ICIT program. We did put out an album. It's on Bandcamp.
Oh, great.
I think yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that in that one I did use this kind of made up languages to kind of say.
I love it.
Yeah, I like the idea of, again, not coming up with concrete statements. So that helps a lot, kind of.
I mean, music is in a lot of ways very, very not concrete.
Right.
But sorry, I had a thought and I lost it. Free improv versus technique is this thing that drives me crazy. I think about this all the time, about how to relate these things,
right,
and what the function of it is, because most of the musicians I deal with now have no connection to like free improv at its farthest extremes of the freedom to explore sounds or musical sounds or something like that, where technique in a sense doesn't matter.
Yeah,
sort of.
Right.
And there's a story that Molly Jones, do you remember Molly Jones?
Yeah.
She told me once about, and I don't remember who it was. It was just a story of a show she went to once where a jazz pianist decided to do the whole show on saxophone, and he didn't play saxophone at all. And I love this. I wish I'd seen the show. I love this idea so much.
Yeah.
That I'm throwing all the technique part away.
Yeah.
And just trying to sort of engage musically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with free improv, what I think of it is, I mean, this, what you mentioned is very interesting. And this kind of what I do a lot of times. I let the sounds and what what comes into mind at that moment,
right,
drive the performance. But at the same time, I feel like we are already filled, our minds are already filled with a lot of informations that we have received. And sometimes we tend to, even when you ignore it, somehow you have it in your back of your mind. It's driving whatever you are doing. I think that's really what happens. So with free improv, I think of it more as an opportunity to not, again, see yourself in a box that you have to follow certain rules, and that's the part of it that I'm really interested in. Yet I don't necessarily think about the using of the techniques that I know, unless I start using it. I go like, oh, now I'm using it. And that happens mainly because I usually, when something I have experienced with Persian music, and it's very interesting, and I would say unique about it, is how a lot of the music that is created is inspired by poetry meaning and poetry rhythms in the poetry. So either it's the rhythm of the poetry or the meaning behind it that kind of inspires the music that you are creating, and you're trying to tell that story with your instrument. And kind of I use that kind of idea when I'm improvising. So I'm thinking about it. I'm saying a story, and then that story inspires the sound that I am creating. So I'm just moving through that story, and sometimes you use a specific technique that of suddenly, and and that just comes to your mind,
Right.
because that you are just using all the tools available to you in order to tell that story and share that story. So that's kind of what I see, what kind of opportunities I see within like thinking about free improv. So I'm not sure if we can be completely free again. I think that makes me, I don't know, for me it makes me anxious to think about that I'm completely free.
Right.
I don't know what does it mean even, because we are not in that stage.
Because you're obviously not. I can't reach farther than that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I see opportunities to just imagine that you are free and just be free from forms. I think forms are some things that keep us, playing.
I mean, there's sort of an impossibility embedded in it. I going back to what you were saying about trying to convey a meaning that would be conveyed through poetry, but say on an instrument or something like that, you're already fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
It's going to be very difficult to get somebody to understand something so specific. Yeah. I mean, even if the meaning isn't that specific, it's still going to be a lot harder to do it on an instrument than with words. And then even the Van Gogh idea, probably the best way to convey a sunflower is to have a sunflower. But then to try and do it with colors, now you're fighting a losing battle again. This is difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, the whole point then would be to just use that as an inspiration, but not be worried about what others take is
of
on
course.
That, right? Yep. So let them actually. That's kind of the inclusiveness you are promoting this way, right? You're letting them to come up with their own conclusions and create their own, whatever world it is from what they are experiencing, and that's I think the beauty of it. I think the beauty of the improvisation is that. So you let them, you have something in mind, but you let the audience to, and in general, I think it's art, right? Being creative. So. Yeah.
I mean, but the other thing is you're experiencing it too, because you're hearing it,
right?
And it sounds like music to you.
Yeah.
It's this crazy thing. It's that whole middle point of where the music is. I had a podcast. It was like 2 years ago now or something like that, with a singer-songwriter from Canada, and I think about this all the time. And I've actually said it on the last few shows. But she told me that music is literal magic. Music literally is magic, and I love that.
Yeah,
just that statement, and it's such a direct and forceful statement. It's not that music is like magic. Right. Music literally is magic.
Interesting. Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. Cool. And so, I mean, you've had so many interesting thoughts on this. I'm happy to hear you're an educator also. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that side of your practice.
Yeah. So actually, that's well, well, educator is a term I use, but I mean, we all use, but I think I see myself as a facilitator of learning process.
Sure.
And so I have been teaching since I was 14. So I started because I love teaching. Somehow I just love the process of teaching. I really find it rewarding for myself. So I feel like when I'm teaching, or I feel like I'm sharing, right? So I'm sharing the stories I know. I'm like, when I talk to my students, when I teach, like, for example, music history, I don't think that I want to make them to read a specific chapter of a book, or learn about a specific composer or anything like that. I think of it as an opportunity to share things that I have experienced previously, and how I found it interesting for someone living now to know about these concepts, right? So I have been teaching music theory history, performance, composition,
Classics.
and I have been, I have been fortunate to teach. Well, during my last 2 years as a PhD student, I was teaching at Saddleback College, it's close here,
Cool.
where I studied English. So when I came to the US, I didn't know English because I learned Armenian and a little bit of Russian as my second language in Armenia. And then when I moved to US, I had to learn English.
And that's impressive.
So I went to Saddleback College, and it became kind of a home because it was the first space for me to have friends, and speak English. And so
that's amazing.
Yeah, and I was lucky.
College, that's interesting. I just got a call for a gig there.
Oh, really?
But it's like I don't live there anymore.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So I was. I was there for 2 years. I taught like musicianship, harmony, composition, and then now I'm teaching at SoCal University of America. It's close to here also. Now I'm teaching music history and composition there. I teach intro to world music, Persian music. I will teach next fall, I think.
Oh, like a class dedicated specifically to Persian music?
Yeah, so music of Persia. Yeah. I have taught music in modern Iran at UCI when I was a PhD student. I designed and proposed the course, and they let me teach actually that course, which was a great experience because, even as a musician on the stage, whether it is composing or improvising on a stage, I see it as an opportunity for me to share. And I think teaching is also the same thing. You share what you have gone through with, or what you have learned with others. That's something I really enjoy doing in general. That's why I talk a lot. Sorry, I have been just talking.
I love it. No, that's great. First of all, that's the perfect thing for a podcast guest.
Yeah.
It's worse when it's like, come on, please keep talking.
There should be a podcast that you invite the people who talk a lot, and they have to be silent for like 20 minutes.
Just talk at them, and they want to jump in. Don't let them.
Yeah. You can count on me for that,
Great.
But so I think in general, I see teaching as a way for sharing stories, and I think it's really important to do that. And I enjoy teaching very much.
Yeah.
And
I've been thinking about, in terms of teaching for the last couple of years, I have a friend who sort of challenged me in this way, because I feel like it's very popular now to talk about, in sort of a simple way of putting it, to talk about teaching how versus what, or something like that. And he flipped it. He said he thinks it's totally wrong. He said you should teach what versus how, because students who are interested are going to develop their own ideas anyway. And teaching what actually gives them something to push back against more easily. So if you say, this is a C major scale, if you just tell them what, and you don't even tell them how, they're all going to come up with their own way of figuring out how to do it.
Very interesting.
And so you're actually going to get a broader array of ideas about it, versus you start talking to them about how to think about scales, because actually that is sort of controlling the thought process more in this weird way.
Right.
But I don't know, because I think most teaching is some combination of those things.
Yeah. Very interesting. That's right. I mean, I think, I kind of do that when I teach like composition courses. Right now, I'm teaching a composition course, and none of my students are composers or music majors in general. Whoa. And some of them have no background in music. So imagine I am in a class where
I teach a songwriting class like that, actually.
Oh yeah, so actually, I have them to write a short song for their next assignment. Right now, they are creating a 2-minute short film, and then next week we'll talk about how they can put music and sound design for it. And the first assignment I assigned them was finding like 4 or 5 objects around them, whatever it is. It should be just something that's not musical instruments. And I had them to come up with sound, like a music. I didn't call it a music, but I asked them to create a piece that involves sounds created by these objects and some sort of performance. So they had to perform it themselves and record it, and they had to just document how the piece should go from beginning to end. Some of them have them, so I didn't talk about music notation, anything like that. So they have the freedom to just do whatever they want and document it however they want, because I think it's just telling them what kind of sounds, talking about the sound gestures, what it means, what it means to use sound in general. Because I think, they're directed to think about music as a very specific thing by the market, right? So by Spotify, by Apple Music and all that. So I wanted them to start to think about sound. What does it mean to put different sounds together to create meaning? And that's right. And another thing I am focused on when I teach is talking about the whys rather than how to do it. So it's the what, but that's then I'm looking into it as like when it gets to academia, they have to read, they have to grow an understanding of certain possibilities that already exist. So thinking about why something exists, like why 7 chords are used in a certain way in classical music, why they are used in certain ways in jazz music, like why, and trying to just listen for whys. Because I think one thing that I sometimes find lacking in classes in academia in general is that we don't know why we are doing something, and that's when you start disconnecting. That's when you start to say, okay, why am I doing this? Because you start asking why, right? Because you don't know the answer to that why question. And for example, I teach also kids. I teach in this Sunday schools where little kids come in. They are between 3 to 6 years old. There are 2 different classes, and they come in to learn Persian language. But I teach them Persian, or we say Farsi in Persian. I teach them Farsi through songs that I create for the kids. And I'm now working on this album for the kids. That's an interactive album with actually pictures and images that they're going to draw and all that to learn like Persian language. But there I see if they know why they are doing it, they care. They start caring. And same thing I see in my classes in university or college, where when they know why they are learning about the history, or they know why there is a deadline. Even with deadlines, sometimes we have just deadlines, as we learned that in academia, and it's normal to have deadlines.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, what's the point to have a deadline this week, not the next week? Like you want to really think about it. With the Chat GPT, have you talked about the Chat GPT?
Have you played with it? No, I haven't played with it. I'm a little. I have reservations about AI. But
okay, so I
actually don't believe in it. By the way, I've gotten into big arguments with people about it. But
interesting. That would be a different subject. My wife is a computer scientist, so and she works on improving chatbots to make them more, to make them understand and have empathy with people, because specifically when it comes to medical, use of AI. But my thing about it was more about like this Chat GPT exists, and now all the many educators are super scared, especially the ones who teach like writing classes and in humanities departments, and they're scared about what it's going to do to us and how it's going to affect the teaching experience. And that made me actually to think about, why do we have students write papers? Like they take a G class, it's a general education class. on music history, and they have to write 8 pages long on certain composer and certain era, right? Yeah. And then I was thinking about, okay, why should I have my students write? Of course, it helps them to learn how to write, and then if they within their own disciplines, they can write larger papers and but then I was thinking about, okay, I could do other things. Like I could have them present, but then have them write a reflection on how they did the process of their research was. And also I can have them to cite based on certain formats that they will be using, later. Like, and then, they basically have all the material for writing a paper, but I won't have them to write it. Then I won't be worried about whether they're cheating or not, or they cared about the program or not. But I can at least assure that they learned something, and they learn how to research on some a concept that they have never done research on. So thinking about whys, I think, is really important, and I think it's like, why do we teach students to know even about the triad or this tonic chord? Do they really need it in order to become good musicians, or why are we doing it? It's very important. And how then even the answer to why, then you start to change your way of organizing things and change your the weight of everything within a curriculum you're offering.
I mean, need is a very complicated idea. But I remember in my undergrad, we were in, first semester music history kind of a thing, and the professor came in, and the first day he said, I just want you all to know that I teach this course to you because the university requires me to, and I love that. However, I do not believe that any of you need to know any of the things I'm going to tell you to be great musicians. Like, you could be an amazing violin player and not know a single thing that I have to say to you in this class.
Yes, exactly.
And then it was pretty fun. It was interesting because all the jazz majors got really mad. And they're like, no, you need to know the history of this and that. And he just said, I don't think you do.
Yeah. That's right. That's true. Yeah, exactly. That's why, you should know why you are doing something. Sometimes a lot of things we do it's because it exists, right? And because you have to mark off things that you had to do. And we should be aware of it, and we shouldn't be like, we shouldn't hide it from the students. I think we should.
That doesn't mean they're not valuable either.
Yeah, exactly.
They can have value. Yep.
Exactly. So we should tell them that we know. Because the students wants to know that we understand them, right? So I think that's really important, to be transparent with them and make sure that you are telling them why. But then I'm sure, that's my experience, that the students will appreciate, the path they're taking with you in a class, because you are already transparent with them. And that's at least the feedback I have had for the past few years teaching. I don't know, maybe it changes. Maybe I changed my mind. I will let you know next time.
Yeah, cool. Well, do you want to play something, or if there's anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to hit, or like projects you're working on that you wanted to discuss that I haven't brought up?
Not much. We talked about many different things, and I talked and talked. So maybe playing would be cool. We will. It would be nice. And always, if anyone is interested, I would say they can check out my website. I usually try to be as active as possible. Sometimes it's just impossible to be up, have everything updated. At the same time, if I have friends who are listening to this for the first time, they're listening to your podcast. I have been listening to your podcast recently, and I think it's great. I highly encourage all of them to really share this valuable work you are doing, because sometimes we have ideas. I have an idea of doing a podcast, for example, but I never do it because it's a lot of work. So I want to appreciate what you are doing, and I think I'm sure if you have listeners, you will be happy, because all the point of all this work you are doing is to share these wonderful stories that your other guests had, and I enjoyed it. So I really wanted to thank you. And at the same time, if I have my friends listening now, I want them to know how amazing this work is, and they should make sure that they support it as well.
Oh, well, that's very nice. Thank you.
Of course.
And thank you for sharing all your great ideas today. Great thoughts.
Oh, I don't know if they are great, but
I think they are. I think they are.
Well,
yeah. All right. Let's try playing something. I'm gonna grab my banjo. I'll be right back.
Sure.
All right. So you just try something, see what happens.
Sure. Actually, I one note I want to mention. Maybe we can set up kind of a mood for what we are doing.
Sure.
If you are down, is it?
Yeah,
is it,
absolutely.
Okay. So, what has been happening in Iran for the past several months now, actually, is how we have this revolutionary movement in Iran, women life freedom, and a lot of people are struggling with having their basic rights, and especially women in Iran, including my family members, and a lot of people have been killed in this movement, and a lot of innocent people who were just looking, just searching for freedom and liberty. And that's not only limited to Iran, I think. This is a systematic thing going on all around the world. So, just thinking about that, I'm just hearing the first a few notes you just randomly played because you were getting your instrument. It reminded me of that. And I'm interested in lullaby. So maybe we can dedicate just a improvised lullaby to all these people.
Wonderful.
And their families.
Yeah. I'll try. Wow.
Thank you.
Your
How did
vocal
you feel?
performance was really something.
Thank
It
you.
was amazing. Yep.
Oh, I loved your playing, and yeah, well,
Yeah,
it's what it is.
it is. It is.
Yeah.
It's sort of a somber ending. It's hard to go back to the high from that. But is there anything else you wanted to?
Well, let this improvised lullaby
Yeah.
say the story. So
Sure. Well,
uh,
thank you so much, Hesam, for coming on the podcast.
of course, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, and
Very exciting.
yeah, thanks so much. It was a good conversation and a
Thank
good
you.
performance. All right, bye
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening or watching. Be sure to check out Hesam, all of his stuff. Check out the Seaberg Ensemble. Check out his music. Go take a class from him if you are in Southern California. And I'll see you all next time.